recording is an art and a science. It's not a science. It's an art and a science. And the people that ignore the art part of it make crappy recordings. That's all there is to it. I've got a really good digital system, and it sounds great. It doesn't sound as good for whatever reason. But I know that when I sit anybody down to listen to a good turntable, if they've never heard vinyl, when it's over, their minds are just blown away. They have no idea what's possible.
Amen.
The Fidelity Exchange, pulling back the curtain on brands shaping high-end audio and more.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Fidelity Exchange. I'm Drew Baird from Moon Audio, and today we're talking to Michael Fremer, the Dean of Audiophile Writing, and one of the most influential voices in vinyl and analog audio for over 4 decades. Michael is the editor-in-chief of TrackingAngle.com and senior editor at Absolute Sound, and he's been champion vinyl since the early days of the CD era when everyone said analog was dead. If you're into conversations about audio quality, the vinyl resurgence, and what makes music really matter in high fidelity, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Michael, thanks for joining me today. So I see you've graduated from Cornell with a degree in industrial and labor relations. How did you end up as a radio DJ and then a music journalist?
Well, when I got to Cornell, the first thing I did was go to the radio station, which was WVBR, the Voice of Big Red. And the Voice of Big Red had an AM station and an FM station. And the AM station was really aimed at the freshman dormitories. It was a carrier current station, so it didn't run over the air. It ran like through the water pipes. It ran through the electricity. And all the students...
Cup and wire.
Yeah, exactly. All the freshman students could get it. And I got right on the air there pretty quickly and established a reputation as Mad Mike.
There you go. So... in the early 1980s, you became a vocal critic of CD audio quality when everyone else was saying CDs was the future. What made you push back against that narrative? I mean, in some ways, I sort of agree. I was really into vinyl. I was a DJ in college. It took a long time for me to adopt CDs. What's sort of behind your story in that?
So I was not against new technology. And I remember when Denon released vinyl records cut with PCM technology for recording, and they sounded pretty good. And then Ry Cooder's Bop Till You Drop came out, and that was the first commercially released vinyl record cut from a digital file. And I was a big Ry Cooder fan. I had seen him live many times, and I had all of his earlier records. And I remember I ran to Licorice Pizza, which was a record store and later a movie. And I went to Licorice Pizza in Santa Monica. I drove there and I bought that record. I was excited by it. I put it in the passenger seat like a cheap date and looked at it while I was driving. I mean, I was really excited by this record. And I put it on my turntable. And within a minute, it was like, oh.
What happened?
This does not sound right. There's something wrong with this record. First of all, musically, it could be good, but instead of the beats like building and exciting me, each beat is like a pile driver, beating me down into the ground. Like I don't feel. This doesn't make me feel good, and that I didn't understand what that meant. Why was I not feeling good from this record? It didn't sound very good, but it made me feel bad, and that was my first experience with a digital recording on a record. And so the people I spoke to, because I was I was living in California. I had a lot of connections, and people said, well, the problem is the cutting lathe doesn't like this really high dynamic range recording. So you have to wait till it's out on the next technology, which is going to be a compact disc. Okay, so I waited. And then I was at an AES in Los Angeles when they introduced the compact disc. And it was Roxy Music's Avalon. Warner Brothers had converted it to a disc, CD, and they had this. It wasn't a CD player. It wasn't like a Sony CDP 101 that you could buy. It was this giant machine that could play this CD. And they played Roxy Music's Avalon, which at that point was one of my favorite records. Yeah. I mean, my girlfriend had left me. I was living in Los Angeles. You talk about getting fired, being a good experience. Heartbreaking. Having your heart broken is even more important in your life, as far as I'm concerned. Unless you can meet the first person that you love and stay with them the rest of your life, in which case you're probably something else is wrong with you. But no, maybe. So they started playing Avalon, and it sounded so bad and
Mm.
so wrong and so like slippery and slimy and not right.
Yeah.
And even then, I said to myself, okay, it's a new technology. Um, they have to learn how to use it. It's got to improve. No technology is ever born perfect or even good when it first happens. I mean, it's taken vinyl like 50 years or 60 years to get really good. We're learning stuff that are in the grooves of your records that we're getting out now that we did not know about even
Yeah.
20 years ago.
Yeah.
And I said to myself, this will get better. But then all the engineers around me, all these people at the AES that were hearing this go, oh, it's so great. Wow. I've never heard sound that good. And I said to myself, oh no, we are in big trouble if this becomes what's accepted as good sound.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what happened, actually. So I
Yeah.
started my rampage. I started my tirades. I started, writing all these letters to the editor. I went on my campaign to
Yeah.
save vinyl and explain that not that compact discs are bad, but that the sound we're getting now is terrible. So that's how it started for me.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you've been called the Pied Piper of vinyl. When did you realize that vinyl resurgence was actually happening and not just wishful thinking?
I used to sit around, throughout the late 80s. I was living in LA up until 86.
Mm-hmm.
And between like 82 and 86, I was buying, you could go to like Aaron's Records on Melrose, and you could just buy all the greatest records ever made for $1 and $2.98 and $3.98 because all these people were getting rid of their records. And so I went on this campaign. I wrote an article in Music Connection magazine that said, pretty soon, no one's going to be listening to compact discs. It's going to be records again. And that's what I predicted. Why? I just felt that was going to happen. And they published the article, and it had like a proviso at the top. It said, this represents the opinion of this writer. It does not represent the editors or the publishers of this magazine. I mean, it was subversive to say things like that.
Yeah.
But I did. And it got better by the mid-90s. AudioQuest, the cable company, started a record label. I got approached by MCA Records to help them produce a heavy vinyl series. There were people out there who loved vinyl and who did not want to see it die, and they started in the early 90s. And some of the bands, bands like Uncle Tupelo and Wilco and some of these bands, and even Nirvana's Nevermind, that came out on vinyl from Sub Pop Records in 92. When very few records came out on vinyl, but there was a trickle out there. And the people that believed in it were very vocal, and they were out there doing it and doing good things. And so I really had a feeling that this could come back, and the AudioQuest series was popular among certain people, and I started the Tracking Angle print magazine, and we had a pretty good following, and I had a feeling it would come back. And then, of course, it was a Record Store Day that really brought it to the mainstream and really made it, the growth curve started going up.
Yeah. When do you think you could actually say, aha, vinyl is really back? I mean, do you think we're there now?
Yeah, it's a done deal. Now it's a very popular, compared to streaming, I don't care about streaming. I mean, I like streaming. Streaming is the best record store you could ever go to learn what records you might want to buy. But vinyl is in the culture now. It's all over TV commercials. You can look at TV commercials for lung cancer, and there's somebody playing a record for some reason. It's all over the place, and the Kissa bars are all over the world, and it's a strong culture of people that know that having a collection of records and taking out a record and playing it is a great thing. And I used to say to Joe Harley, the tone poet, Joe and I used to sit around in the early 90s and say, we got to save vinyl. If we could only get young people to hear what a record sounds like. There's something about the sound of a record that is emotionally, it does something to you. Can you measure that? No, but you hear it. We know what that is. If we can only get people to experience having a record, taking it up, putting it on the turntable, playing it, they would get it. And that's what's happened. We've broken through the negativity. There's still people out there on the internet saying all the stupidest things about vinyl, those insulting, stupid things, but they don't matter anymore, really, because we won.
Yeah, yeah, and I would wholly agree with that. You know, streaming was a way to get lazy, if you will. You know, it was so easy to just sit on the couch with an iPad and just, you know, I started to find myself, you know, getting halfway through the song, getting bored, going to the next one, going to the next one, going to the next one, going to the next one. You know what I mean? And now streaming has become, and nothing wrong with streaming. Look, it's fantastic, but you know, I find it more as a good background music tool, right? I've really gotten into the last few years. I'm restoring vintage equipment from the 90s. I'm getting really back into all sorts of physical media, not just vinyl, but cassettes, reel to reel. I've got a Revox back there. I had one in college. I restored that one. You know, I bought up all the equipment that I used to have in college, restored that all. Sony ES, a tape deck, tuner, a 5-disc CD carousel. Everything's been recapped. You know, I'm really getting back into physical media. And exactly what you're saying is it's becoming more of a culture thing, if you will, more than anything else. And the other thing that I'm hoping is that, you know, I'm really trying to get my kids into it. They've all two of the three have turntables. And I'm also trying to develop more community because, you know, we all became so isolated during COVID, right? And the biggest thing that I saw that happened during COVID is, you know, we used to get together in the past when we got new music or whatnot, get together in each other's listening rooms, crack open some beers or wine or whatever, talk, listen to the music, reminisce. And that sort of stuff hasn't been going on for a while. So I think vinyl is almost a good healing tool these days, in my opinion.
Absolutely. That's what we did in the 70s, too. That's, you know, and so I have friends now in their 40s. And I got to say, it was funny at the beginning of this, you said vintage equipment from the 90s. That's funny to me.
Well, I mean, I was born in '69, but, you know, the reason I'm focusing on the 90s equipment is I think, you know, that was the time when, you know, everybody was using the same DAC chips at the time. And, you know, the sweetness to all of this equipment was whoever could do the best with like the output stage after the DAC chip, whether it be tube, transform, analog, you know, they had to work so much harder on the circuit after the chip, you know, because everybody was using the same chip. Now there's so many different options and whatnot. And really, I think, you know, and this is a little stereotypical of me to say, but I feel like today's DACs and whatnot, you know, we're going a little bit backwards. It's now, you know, let's build as many pieces of equipment as possible. They're not focusing on these really complex designs that happened after the DAC chip or in the power supplies. And so, like, I was a huge fan of Sonic Frontiers and couldn't afford it back in the 90s. I've bought all of every series of their preamp I have right now, all of them, and I've tweaked them all, recapped them, retubed them, changed out all the wire to high fluting wire because I'm a cable manufacturer. I've got really expensive wire, you know, cleaned them up, and I'm using them really as a genius of the basement way to bring myself inspiration. And that's sort of the same way that I'm looking at now physical media as a way to bring inspiration and curate more togetherness, you know, getting together to listen to music more instead of sitting in a corner with some, you know, AirPods and a phone by yourself in a closet. I mean, you know, and that's the way the world was going during COVID, right?
Yeah, and the world basically is still going there and even worse.
Oh, yeah.
I've got a kid writing for me. He was 20 now. He started writing for me when he was 12. And, you know, a couple of years ago, I said to him, so all the kids that you're friendly with, they basically, one song and they're gone. He goes, one song? They don't listen to a whole song. They'll listen to maybe the chorus or maybe they'll listen to a verse and then they're on to they don't even listen to a whole song anymore.
Yeah.
Except the ones that are into vinyl. And they have the different aesthetic now because they'll put the record on and they'll listen to the whole side and they'll understand that there's a song list that was put together by the artist to have the songs flow in a certain order. Yeah. And, you know, they're getting back into that, which is better for your brain rather than, you know, flipping through things. Yeah. So everything about a record, I've always said everything about a record is ideal for listening to music because the packaging is the best. Yeah. The liner notes you can read.
Yeah.
15 or 18 minutes to a side is probably what the max the brain can deal with before you turn it over. Yeah. And then, so everything about it was ideal. And it's come back, I think, because that's one of the things I said way back. I said the compact disc in that little plastic, it's a data dump in a little plastic tray. It's not very attractive. This is much better looking. and everything I predicted came true. Because if it hadn't come true, I'd be living on the street now,
That's right.
under a bridge, probably.
Yeah. And you'd have a lot of recycled goods behind you. So,
yeah.
So walk us through your journey from writing for Stereophile to editing the Tracking Angle magazine in the 90s to where you are now with the trackingangle.com. What's exciting you right now? Where do you see all of this going?
Well, for me, it's, I started writing for the Absolute Sound in 1986. I supervised the soundtrack to the movie Tron, which was very exciting. And I also wrote an animated feature film, co-wrote it, called Animal Olympics. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but you can, if you're on Amazon Prime, you can watch Animal Olympics. So I co-wrote it. It was done for the 1980 Olympics for NBC, and the voices are Gilda Radner, Billy Crystal,
Oh, wow.
Harry Shearer, and me. Now they've all drifted off into obscurity, and I'm a big star. Well, I actually gave Harry Shearer his first voiceover work in cartoons, because I got him hired for Animal Olympics. And if you watch that movie, which is on Amazon Prime, it's very funny, and it's kind of like it was aimed at adults, but kids would enjoy it, kind of thing. And then we did Tron, which was very exciting, supervising that soundtrack and working with Wendy Carlos. And then just the other day, one of the animators, Roger Allos, I just found out that he died, and he was one of our main animators, and he also wrote The Lion King. So he went on to very big things. He just passed away. Another animator on the project was Brad Bird, who did the Iron Giant.
Yep. Oh, great movie. Great movie.
The Invincibles, I think, was the. He was a major talent that came out of Animal Olympics. So a lot of people came out of that. A lot of people came out of Tron. So I went to work for the Absolute Sound in '86, and then I stayed there until mid '90s. Then I went to Stereophile, and I was there for many years. And then all that time I started, because I was way into vinyl, I wanted to have my own magazine, so I started Tracking Angle. I should have had a copy out here, but it was a perfect bound, glossy, 14,000 subscribers by the end. It was a very good magazine, but magazines were difficult at that point in time.
Yeah.
And so I went to work for Stereophile. I started a website called musicangle.com, and then Stereophile bought that, and I started Analog Planet and ran that for a decade, and then left that. What happened is, I said, I've been there a decade. I think you should pay me more money, and they didn't want to give me a raise, and said, all right, I quit. They were shocked that I would do that.
Yeah.
And my wife said, you better quit, because it's gonna kill you, because you're very upset that they're not taking good care of you. And that's the truth of what happened. And I always say what the truth is. It doesn't matter if, you're going to offend somebody or they won't like you for that. That's what happened. And so I'm telling you what happened. I would have stayed if they just give me a little more.
Money.
She said, you quit. You'll find, you're very resourceful. You'll be fine. So that's what happened. I quit. I went back to the Absolute Sound and started trackingangle.com. And it's been a couple of years now, and I think I built a really great website. I'm really proud of that website. If you go to that website and look at the reader engagement, look at the comments, you get 30 and 40 comments per article. I've got over 20 great writers writing for me, not all at the same time, but they're there. And the reader engagement is phenomenal. I don't have trolls commenting. I've got all good commenters, and we have a community going. So I learn a lot from the readers. They learn a lot from our writers. Everybody contributes to each other. It's ideal. Yeah. And of course, now I'm putting out records of my own, and I happen to have them here. So
really,
of course, I'll show them to you. And I made a DVD called 21st Century Vinyl. How to set up Michael Fremer's Practical Guide to Turntable setup. Mm-hmm. And that's already an old thing, but it still sells. Yeah. And when I came out with that, I invested a lot of money to do that. And I felt that the best way to know how to set up a turntable is to watch it being done, not read about it. Yeah. So I went to some experts on instructional DVDs, and I said, so I'm doing an instructional DVD. What's the shelf life of that, and how many can I expect to sell? And they said, well, unless you're Jane Fonda, you can expect to sell 3,000 or 4,000, and the shelf life is a couple of years for most of these things. So I said, I'm not Jane Fonda, and I did it, and I figured it would be on the shelf for a couple of years, and I would have to sell I'd have to charge $20 or $30 in order for me to make my money back. I put $20,000 into it. Well, it's like 15 years later, it still sells, and people still enjoy watching it, even though it's, it's not exactly the most exciting subject. But I made it fun.
Yeah.
It's kind of fun to watch it. It still sells. So I put this record out about 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Rufus Beat presents Kale and Cardello, and I've told that story many times on these videos about how I came upon this concert. Rufus was playing, Kalen was playing. I didn't know who Kalen Cardello was, but after 2 songs, I said to my friend, this should have been recorded because it's amazing. And if I could get the rights to put this out on vinyl, if it was being recorded, I would do it. And my friend said, microphones, it's being recorded, so let's do it. So after the show, I went up to Rufus Reid and I said, because Rufus Reid is a very famous bass player, and I said, Rufus, if this sounds good, I want to put it on a vinyl. Can I do that? And he said, pay me and you can do that. So I did. Anyway, I should pause for a second to say that my wife is in the dog world. We went to the Westminster Dog Show on Monday, spent all day there. I drove back and forth 4 times. We stayed up late watching last night, so I'm a little bit fried right now. If I seem a little bit frazzled, it's partly that. Fine. I'm sleep deprived. Anyway, Rufus said fine. So after I got the rights to do it, I found out that Kalen was like this rising young star in the New York jazz community, and people knew who he was. And I went to one event, and a bunch of the New York jazz cognoscenti were sitting around, and I said, any of you guys ever hear of Kalen Cardello? And they all looked up and said, oh, somebody's going to sign Kalen very soon. I said, well, I didn't sign him, but I'm putting out his first record. So that's when I knew I had something really good going on.
Very cool.
And so we put the record out, and when we finished it, I sent the files to Bob Ludwig just as Bob was about to retire, very famous mastering engineer. So I sent it to Bob, and I said, Bob, I'm really proud of this record. I'm about to cut the lacquers and put it out on vinyl, and I want you to have it as, I've known you for all these years, so I want you to have this. Next day, he got back to me and said, I want to master this. I want my name on. I want to master this record for you, so my name is on. Hey, yeah, okay, fine. I said to my friend who put it out with me, I said, we didn't do this for the money. If we lose money on it, we're fine, because we wanted to make this, document this young person's first recording.
Sure.
And he said, let's go for it. So we went for it, and we did this. We did a 180 gram. We pressed it on a QRP. We did a tip-on jacket. We did the whole thing the right way. We sold out all 2,000 copies, made money on it, and we could press. People want me to press more of these.
Yeah, I was going to say, where could people buy it if they were interested in buying it?
Right now, there are used copies that are starting to go for more money, but I'm not putting it out until Kalen's new record, which I just happen to have a copy of right here. I'm going to show you. It's this one.
So that one people can buy now. I've seen that cover. I've seen that cover somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just came out. It's called Chapter 1. Kalen, it's on Liam Records, which is my dog is Liam, which we showed Liam at the dog show on Monday at Westminster. He didn't do well. He's a great dog, and the dog world is
a whole other animal.
The dog world is fairly corrupted. It's good dogs tend to win, but not always. And there are things, and we know the judge is a friend.
Right.
I don't want to go into it.
Oh yeah.
My wife will get in trouble with the AKC if I do this. But anyway, a great dog won last night, and so that's fine. But so we put this out, and it's only been out a couple of weeks now, and it's already selling pretty well, and it's on Liam Records. You can buy this at Acoustic Sounds. You could buy it at Elusive Disc. You could buy it at Music Direct.
Yeah.
And it's great. It's a power trio. It's Domo Branch, who is an absolutely amazing drummer. I mean, if you think Ginger Baker was a hot drummer, this kid is amazing. And Jonathan Muir-Cotton is the bass player, and the three of them are phenomenal together. And it's exciting. Yeah. So it's just on the market. So when this thing takes off, then I will go back and reissue Rufus Presents Kalen Cardello. If you're a streamer, you can stream this album on Qobuz or Tidal or wherever you stream, and get an idea of what it sounds like. But I'm telling you, the record sounds so much better than the stream. Even though the stream is high resolution, we did things to make this record sound phenomenal,
Yeah.
and it's from a file. And so when people say, well, why would you bother to release vinyl when it comes from a digital file? Well, you can do things to change the sound and make it sound really great on vinyl, and that's what we did.
Yeah.
And it sounds great.
So you served as an expert witness in the Quincy Jones versus Michael Jackson estate trial in 2017. You got to tell me about that, and what was that kind of experience like?
Okay, I will tell you that after one more record. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Show me one more.
So this is Patrick Leonard. It's called "It All Comes Down to Mood." Now you know who Patrick Leonard is, right?
I do not. I'm sorry to say.
Okay, so Patrick Leonard produced all of Madonna's early records.
Oh,
and
okay.
Wrote the songs on a lot of Madonna's early records.
Right.
He produced many of the tracks on the last 3 Leonard Cohen records, the really great ones before he passed away.
Yeah.
And he produced "Amused to Death" for Roger Waters. That's among his credits. So
not too shabby.
Not too shabby. So
Yeah.
one day I got a call from Patrick Leonard, and who I knew who he was, obviously, and he asked me if I would produce the vinyl version of his new double record set. So I did. I was thrilled to meet Patrick and do this for him, and I got to do it because Bob Ludwig mastered all of his stuff, and he said to Bob, "I want this record. This belongs on vinyl. This is a double record set that really needs to be heard on vinyl. What should I do?" And Bob said to call me. And I'm telling you that when I heard that, I am having the best time of my life right now. It is I'm having the most fun doing the best stuff, best work I've done, and I'm just telling all of you young whippersnappers out there, it can just get better as you get older. It can get better and better and better. So I produced the version on vinyl for this. Chris Bellman cut the lacquers of this. The bass players are Tony Levin and John Patitucci. It's got Wendy Melvoin from Prince's band, Martin Barr from Jethro Tull, all kinds of great players who you may not have ever heard of too. And it's a double record set. It's an extremely thoughtful prog rock record that has a lot to say about culture and society. And it's kind of like Roger Waters' "Amused to Death," but it's less preachy and less whiny and more thoughtful, I think. The sound is fantastic, and so I recommend that too.
Yeah, that sounds really good. I'm definitely going to get that one.
It sounds great. Wherever I play that, because I take these records to shows, people run, "Where can I buy that?" And they run upstairs and they buy it.
Yeah.
So, okay. So one day I got a call from a lawyer in Texas who I knew because he's one of my readers from the Absolute Sound for years and years. And he said to me, "Michael, I know you. I've known you for a long time. And I represent Quincy Jones in a lawsuit. He's suing the estate of Michael Jackson. And there are certain things that I think you can do for this lawsuit that I don't think anyone else I know of could do what you can do. So I want to hire you to be an expert witness for Quincy in this lawsuit." So, okay, that's good. And I did. And they made an offer to me that sounded like really stupid money. Like, oh, okay, this is good.
If you win, right? Yeah.
I have another friend who's an expert witness. His whole job is being an expert witness, and he's a forensic psychiatrist. And so I called him and I said, "Listen, I got hired by Quincy Jones' attorney to be an expert witness in this case, and they're giving me this, and that." He goes, "What?" He goes, "Listen, you can't make what I make because I've been doing this for decades, and you're new at this. But no, they think that you don't know. You ask them for this, and you tell them that the clock starts running the minute you get up in the morning, and the minute your front door closes, the clock runs to the time you get to Los Angeles and you hit the pillow, then it stops. And you keep logs of all the work you do to prepare for this trial, and you keep the timing logs, and you bill them at this rate." I said, "What? Really?" He goes, "Call them up and tell them that's what you want. I promise you they'll say, okay." And they did. But then the pressure was on. Then the pressure was on for me to really come through, right?
Yeah.
So I did. I I went back and forth to Los Angeles. We rehearsed what I was going to do. I had to be deposed by Michael Jackson's lawyer, and in a room full of people, and that was pressure. We rehearsed for that, and he said to me, "Listen, don't rock in your chair. Don't swing your chair back and forth. Don't interrupt the attorney questioning you. Just sit still and behave." I said, "Okay." So I sat still, and the first question she said, "Now remember, I'm going to ask you these questions, and you are to wait until I finish the question. Don't interrupt, because someone has to be transcribing this. So don't interrupt me." So I said, "Oh, so this is like marriage, right?" And so my attorney kicked me under the seat. It was a funny line I had to say. All right. So then after being deposed, we had to prepare what I was going to do, what I was going to say, how I was going to cover there were a bunch of different people testified. My testimony was about the contract that Quincy Jones had with the estate of had with Michael Jackson when he was alive. Was Michael Jackson owned the masters, but any reuse of the masters, any reuse of the multitrack or the mixdowns, anything, was subject to Quincy Jones's approval. That's what he wanted, and Michael Jackson gave that to him. Certain things happened after Michael Jackson passed away that Quincy claimed were reuses of the masters without his permission, and that's mostly what I was brought on board to talk about. And my contention was that the reissues were so bad. When those recordings were made, Bruce Swedian, who was the engineer, everything was recorded with Bloomline pairs. So Michael Jackson's voice was recorded with a Bloomline pair. So when Michael Jackson got closer to the microphone and backed away from the microphone, there was a three-dimensional aspect to it. And if you listen to the album Bad, because that was what most of this was about, even though it was a digital recording and everything else, it's three-dimensional. It's really a three-dimensional recording. And when the background singers sing, I'm bad," which is actually Michael Jackson multitrack, they're layered in three-dimensional space. And at the beginning of this recording, there's a flourish, bum, 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 and each of those notes, they're cases in volume.
Yeah.
And there's a synthesizer that goes back and forth between the speakers. And it'll go back. If you have good speakers and a good system, it's three-dimensional. It's outside in front of your speakers. It goes back and forth. It's an extremely three-dimensional recording. And the original pressing has it, and the original CD has it. And every time they reissued it, they just squashed it further and further. And so my plan was to bring a stereo into the courtroom, teach the jurors all of the audiophile, teach them what a Bloomline pair was, teach them sound staging, soundstage depth, soundstage width, three-dimensional, every audiophile buzzword. I was going to teach the jury all of this stuff in 10 minutes, and then play them the original Bad, and break down the first 5 minutes. So you're going to hear this, you're going to hear that. The little helicopter synthesizer is going to appear in front of the sound. It's going to go back and forth right in front of your ears. Michael Jackson's going to come right into the room and back. And then I'm going to play you the smashed CD, and none of that's going to happen. And my contention is that reissue is so bad that everything that Quincy Jones wanted to do, everything that he produced, everything that Bruce Swedian wanted to do, was destroyed by these reissues. That was my contention. And the lawyers bought it, and that's what we were going to do. So the night before the trial, the day before the trial, we sit in this office in downtown LA, and we rehearse. And my lawyer asks me the questions, and I answer the questions. And by the end of the day, we have this thing down to a science. And we do one final run through at night. And in that run through, the expert for the attorney is there, and all these different people are there watching the thing. And at the end, the expert and the group psychologist says, I don't think we should do that tomorrow, because I don't think these kids are gonna. I don't think the jury's been seated, and they're young people, and I don't think they're gonna get any of this stuff. And I know the speakers are in there and the system's there, but you haven't heard it. You're not allowed to hear it till it goes, and I don't think it's gonna work, and I don't think we should do it. And I said, so first of all, when the rehearsal was over, I said to myself, you know what? I've learned so many presentational skills from the way they coached me, that I would have paid them to learn what I've learned. But okay, never mind that. So then the guy that hired me walks in the room and he goes, well, Michael, are you all ready for tomorrow? It's going to be a really big day. And the expert goes, I don't think we should. This guy's name was Mike too. He says, Mike, I don't think we should do this. I don't think the young people are going to get this. I don't think they're going to hear any of this. I think it's really a bad idea, and it's not good for the case. So he looks at me and he goes, well, Michael, I've read you for all these years, and I've learned to trust you, and your judgment in audio and music has been so sound. What do you think? And I said, Mike, I think they're going to hear it. He goes, okay, then we're going to go with it. Now, Michael, you go back to your room and you have a good night's sleep, and we'll see you in court in the morning. Said, okay. So I'm walking to my room going, what have I done?
Now you got to do it.
So much easier for me to say, okay, you don't want to do it?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just...
Yeah. Give me my check.
Get there the next day, and I'm not allowed in the courtroom until I get up on the stand. I didn't know where the speakers were. I didn't know how loud it was going to play. I knew nothing.
Right.
But I spent most of the night listening to this first 3 minutes of bad and getting every nuance down on headphones. And so we get to the courtroom, and as I go in, my lawyer says, the judge is in a really bad mood, so you get on the stand and you make your brain talk to your mouth, and no hems and haws, no uhs, no let me think about that. You just go. I said, okay. So I get on the stand, and my attorney starts asking me the questions. I start answering them, and I look to the jury. You don't look at them too much. You don't freak them out. I said, you're going to hear the first 4 minutes of the song, and I'm going to break it down for you. And here's what you're going to hear. And I tell them what a bloom line pair is, and I tell them what imaging is, sound staging, depth of field, dynamic range, everything. And I say, and when this flourish starts, it's going to be this announcement, Michael Jackson is back. And I look over and I go, oh, Michael Jackson is back. And I realized they were so excited. I said, hit it. And they hit play. And it was loud. It was a pair of Wilson Sabrinas in the courtroom. And it was loud. And the attorney who had questioned me a couple of months earlier at the deposition, was really pretty nasty. It was so loud, and the speaker was right there. She fell out of her seat. I swear to God, she slipped out of her chair and fell on the floor.
Oh my God!
And I, from where I was sitting, I could hear everything I was telling them that they would hear in 3 dimensions. It worked perfectly as far as I was concerned.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it was over, he said, "Well, now we're going to play you the squashed reissue."
Yeah.
And they play it, and it was horrible. It was flat, dead. I know that they heard it. Yeah. And so I was finished, and I got off the stand, and as I'm walking off the stand, the expert who had told me not to do this, he goes, this could be a movie. It was so great.
That's an amazing story.
There's more to it, but I'll stop there.
That's really cool. That's a great story. Man. So let's talk about some controversy. In 2022, Mobile Fidelity, there was a big moment where transparency matters. How about let's talk a little bit about that? I mean, I think that was a very respectable situation on your part.
It was, and I paid the price for it, but that's fine. And so I'll tell you what happened. So there was a rumor floating around about this, that they were, cutting from DSD. And look, I've released 3 records cut from digital files, and they sound fantastic. So, but they were advertising the ultra analog, whatever they want, all analog chain. That's what it was. And so someone said to me, there's a rumor that they're cutting from DSD files, and because Sony, at one point Sony would let tapes out. So Kind of Blue, the 3-track master tape of Kind of Blue, was sitting at Bernie Grundman's for like 2 years.
Yeah,
just sitting there, and he used that 3-track master to make the metal to make the final master, cut the lacquers for the kind of blue that you could buy now that Chad Kasem has out, all analog. And that tape sat there for like 3 years. Yeah. And I'd go visit Bernie, and I'd say, Bernie, why is that tape still here? He goes, I call them, but they don't pick it up. So finally they picked it up. And so now Sony no longer lets tapes out. You got to make a copy. So Mobile Fidelity would bring their Tim Paravicini special tape recorder to Battery Studio, and Sony would get the master tape and let them make a copy of that tape, and that was what they would use to cut their lacquers. So even though it said original master tape, it was one off the master. And that's fine.
Right.
Because most of the great records that you have, if you have records from the 50s and 60s, were not cut from the master tape. They were cut from a cutting master that was made from the master. So that's fine. They came to the conclusion that they could do better work if they would bring their DSD recorder, which was, you could put it under your arm and make a copy from that. Fine. But they didn't tell anybody about it. So the rumor came to me that they were cutting from DSD masters, and people said to me, "Well, are you gonna say something about that?" People on the inside. I said, "It's only a rumor now. I don't know." And a certain individual who I will not mention said to me, "Oh, it's going to be announced. This whistleblower is coming out in a couple of days, and he's going to announce it." I said, "Well, when he announces it, then I'll write about it. I do not indulge in rumors, and I don't. I try to be a responsible person." So somebody else came out with the rumor. It was a big to-do. It was on a website, and he's a record dealer in Phoenix, Arizona, and he came out with this rumor, and then all of us, and he said, "This is what's happening," and all of a sudden I became the bad guy in all of this because, well, Fremer wouldn't write about it. He knew about it, but you know why he wouldn't write about it? Because he's on the Mobile Fidelity gravy train, and he gets all those records, and so he wouldn't say. Now, the truth of the matter is, first of all, getting records is nice, but if I don't like a record, I'll say so. And I was saying not great things about. I said good things about some of those MoFis that were cut from digital files, and some of them I said not good. They didn't sound right to me, and I said it. But I got hit with all this crazy stuff. Well, he loved all those records, and he didn't know they were digital. Well, no, I didn't love all of them. I loved some of them. Like Love Forever Changes. They put that out. It didn't sound great to me. I said it doesn't sound great, and they were very upset with me. But anyway, that's not here or there. So that's what happened to me, and then all of a sudden I became persona non grata at Mobile Fidelity too. So everybody hated me for that. But okay, we're back on good terms again. And that's that. But I told the truth. I wouldn't write about a rumor. So
yeah. And it's interesting. I sent you an email earlier this week about something I read that you post on LinkedIn about you were comparing an original recording vinyl to a newly released one, and all the dynamics were squashed and whatnot. And I've seen so much of that in the last 10 years, not just in vinyl but in digital, that some of these recordings on a reissue of vinyl of an album that I know so well, and then I get this vinyl and I would have thought, this is going to sound even better, and it sounds worse than digital. And I'm like, what's going on here? There seems to be all kinds of weird shortcuts in, just trying to get stuff out to market or whatnot. I mean, what's your take on all that stuff? And a lot of this happened, when HD tracks first started, and they were trying to get lots of high-res, digital downloads. And I heard all these rumors about people were upsampling stuff that was, were trying to create something from nothing. You can't create bits from nothing. And trying to upsample to a higher resolution often had a worse effect than the original. I mean, why is that sort of stuff going on? I mean, just a money game?
What's going on now is all the squashing is still going on.
Yeah.
And so when they do a reissue on vinyl, where there's a good tape being used, and they're putting it out on streaming and digital, and for some reason they feel they want to squash it and give it punch, they make one master, and that master is squashed and punched, and then they don't want to do another master for vinyl, ironically, so they give that master to the cutting engineer, and that becomes the record. It's just ridiculous. It's stupid. People say, CDs have a much wider dynamic range than vinyl. Yeah, well, then why is it that the vinyl has a wider dynamic range than the CD? Which it does. Yeah. It doesn't have to, but that's what ends up happening. Yeah, it's totally ridiculous what's going on there.
Yeah.
But it is.
Let's talk a little bit about equipment. So you've reviewed countless high-end systems, and when it comes to, all the different things that are in the chain, the phono preamp, the cartridges, the turntables, the cables, all this stuff, where do you think is the most often overlooked piece of the puzzle?
Well, a chain is only as strong as the weakest link.
Yeah.
So everything's important, and the people I really feel sorry for are the people that don't think cables make a difference. These people are really so wrong about that. Cables make a huge difference, and you could demonstrate that to anybody, even the deniers. You could demonstrate it to them. Now, I'm not saying you should spend $10,000 on a cable for $1,000 stereo system, or $10,000 for a cable for any system. That's your choice. But cables make a difference, and one of the biggest differences in cables is the AC cable that goes from your wall to your amplifier.
Oh boy, you're going to cause controversy there, but
I don't care.
I'm with you.
I had a manufacturer here who was a total cable denier, an amplifier manufacturer, and he supplied, just rubber cables, but that's fine. That's what, that's fine. And I said, and I had them in the system when he came to visit. I said, now I'm going to take, and the system sounded great, and I said, now I'm going to take your cables out that you supply, and it was an expensive amplifier, and I'm going to put this AC cable. Well, he was in English. Well, cables cannot make a difference. This is rubbish. So, okay. We played some music, changed the cables. Well, that's much, much better. Why is that? First of all, I don't care why it is. I just know it is.
Yeah.
It's like digital switches. Digital switch that goes from the internet to your DAC. Well, that can't make a difference. The guys that do that. Well, I'm a digital engineer, and I know there's little packets, and the packets get put in, and you take an RJ, whatever the cable is, and send it over, and that's all. The digital switch, it cannot make it. It cannot.
Yeah.
But it does, and you
everything.
can prove that.
Yeah.
To anybody that's willing to sit down and listen. Oh, you can't believe what you hear. I don't know if you know this, but you cannot believe what you hear because there's confirmation bias, and there's, we'll do a double blind test. Watch, I'll do this, double blind. Can you hear the difference? No, but nobody listens like that. That's not how you listen. That's totally different.
Yeah.
Digital switches make a difference, and I'll let other people worry about why. AC cables coming from the wall. Put a filter on the end of your faucet, and then measure the total dissolved solids, and it makes a big difference.
Yeah.
And so don't tell me that because the water comes from an aqueduct that goes down, through pipes, through lead pipes or whatever, from a reservoir, and the last 3 feet it goes through your little filter, it's going to make a difference. It does make a difference.
Yeah.
And AC cables make a huge difference. Just borrow some. Just try it, and you'll hear it.
Yeah.
You will.
So, little background on me in case you haven't had time to research our website or whatnot. But we're 50% a retailer, 50% a manufacturer, and we're a cable manufacturer. And the way I got in,
snake oil salesman, Drew.
Yeah, exactly.
Snake oil.
That's right. And the original way I got into this was, I went to Penn State to become an acoustical engineer, and I actually wanted to become a speaker manufacturer, and this is back in the late 80s and early 90s. Obviously way before the internet and the marketing that you can do now and the CNC machines that you can do now where you can build smaller batches. And I went to a couple of manufacturers and talked to them about, how to get into the business. And they said, this is a really, really hard part of the business to get into. If you don't do it right, you don't get the marketing, you're going to have a hell of a lot of firewood on your hands, right? Because you can't just build one cabinet, right? So I started chickened out, and I went from electrical engineering into structural engineering. I've been kicking myself ever since because I've been, I built my own speakers and modified equipment and so forth. And so I get married in '99, and this is around the time of the home theater craze. Buy my first house, I'm having my first child, I've got all this equipment that I've built myself or modified, and I'm building a home theater, and the last thing I needed in there were cables. And I had thousands and thousands of dollars of cables taste, but I had no money at the time because, we're starting a new family, right? So my wife says, no, you know how to build all this stuff. Why don't you build your own cables? So, there were all kinds of brands back then selling off the shelf connectors and wires. So I bought some bulk interconnect, DH Labs, BL1, and Cardis connectors, and I built all these cables for the theater. And at the end, I had leftovers. And so I put these leftovers, this is right around the time eBay started. I put them on eBay and they sold in a couple of days, right? And I said, oh man, here's a way for me to make some hobby income to buy more toys. And I was still an engineer at the time. I was doing engineering.
Yeah.
And so
what principles did you put into place in building those cables? Like what metal?
well,
did
this
you use?
was at that time, it was just I'm using off the shelf, DH Labs and Cardis and silver solder.
So you're doing the terminating and doing a good job of it, and
Exactly.
making it so other people can buy these cables and not too much money, and they're terminated properly. And yeah. Okay.
And then so AudioGone starts, and I noticed that people are selling really, really expensive like NBS cables that were like fire hoses and were like $1,000 a meter, and they'd buy them, used 30-foot pair, and they wanted somebody that can cut it up into 1 meter pairs. So what I started doing was offering retermination and repair work on cables because nobody was doing that in the U.S., right? Everybody was getting their cables manufactured in China or overseas, getting them done in standard lengths, sending them to the U.S., and nobody was doing that kind of work. So I started doing that service, and this gave me a way to look at what everybody was using in their cables. I mean, I had some crazy stuff come through with like liquid-filled cables, and I mean, there was a lot of snake oil. I'd open up this cable, and it had transmission fluid in it and Belden wire that was like 2 cents a foot. I priced it all out. I listened to it, and half the time I didn't have the heart to tell these people what was in here because I also had to charge a lot of money to try and keep the fluid in the cable or whatnot, right? But this gave me a way to look at what everybody was doing and who made good cables and who made bad cables. One of the few cables out there that was done very well were Cardis cables. I mean, what George did with his stuff was phenomenal. And so what I soon realized is that less is more with cables. You don't need to have 20 layers of shields and 50 layers of heat shrink and all this stuff because actually that impedes what's going on with the electrical signal field that's going on with these conductors. And so I generated my first interconnect. It was the Silver Dragon interconnect. It was reviewed by Positive Feedback, I think in 2003. We've won multiple Cable of the Year awards, and the deal with my cables is we've sold direct our entire time, right? And the reason we sell direct is because we don't want to have that 3-tier markup, right? We want to sell a cable for a fair price, and we want people to be able to afford to see what they can actually do with a cable. Because, like you say, I find everything in the signal path makes a difference, and that's sort of what I found out for many years. Restoring and modifying equipment, where different materials and capacitors made the difference. Different resistor materials, everything makes a difference. Say again?
Yeah, of course, especially capacitors in amplifiers.
Oh, huge difference. Huge difference. So anyway, so I always, it's hard to sort of convince the naysayer that already is going to say that, cables don't make a difference because they're never going to A/B them properly. I'd rather sell it to somebody that's with an open mind, does some comparisons. And I always recommend, and this is not just with cables, with anything. Like, let's say I get a pair of headphones. If you listen to a pair of headphones right out of the box and you've been listening to another pair of headphones for 10 years, you're going to gravitate towards those old pair of headphones because that's what your brain is used to, right? I always say, put those headphones in the closet, give them a rest, listen to the new headphones for a couple weeks, now go back to the old one or the old pair of speakers or whatever. And now the brain says, oh, wait a minute, this is what I lost, or this is what I've gained, or, so that's the best way I've found to do A/B comparisons.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be, when you're an experienced listener, you know how to work around what your brain might try to fool you with. There's no doubt about it. You have to be careful. Just like when you go buy loudspeakers, if the guy's switching from one to the next, you're going to go for the brightest one unless you understand that that's a trap you can fall into. Yeah. But anyway, you were talking about the weakest link, and we got into cables, but it's all important, and having a balanced system is the most important thing you can do. Yeah. So you're not spending too much money on anything. If you want bass, you're going to have to spend more money on your loudspeakers, and spend less money on everything else. Well, the transducer is the most critical thing in terms of linearity. If you have a vinyl system, your cartridge is going to make the most difference in terms of your linearity, and your speakers are going to do that. And there's great electronics now for not that much money to get started with. So,
without a doubt.
Yeah. It's a great time for audio, even though people say it's gotten priced out of the world. Top end stuff is expensive, and there's great stuff out there. And at the bottom of the market, though, you can get a really the bottom of the market when I was a kid was a flip down Sears Roebuck changer that was garbage.
I had it.
Yeah, and now
that was my first stereo from Sears.
Yeah, you can have a real stereo for very little money.
Yep.
If you get smart, you can go on eBay and get a turntable. You can go on eBay
Yep.
and get a used NAD amplifier for not much money.
Yep.
Or you can get some of this new Chinese stuff. But I always tell people, if you want to buy the cheap Chinese stuff, just remember when it breaks, you're throwing it away. It's not going to be fixable.
No service.
And that's fine.
No service.
That's fine too. It's all fine.
That's
and if you don't think cables make a difference, that's fine. And if you think vinyl is a waste of money, that's fine.
Amen.
And if you think it's all pops and clicks, that's fine. But I know that when I sit anybody down to listen to a good turntable, if they've never heard vinyl, when it's over, their minds are just blown away. They have no idea what's possible.
Yeah.
And they had no idea vinyl could sound that
Amen.
good. And they always say, this sounds better than... Let me hear your digital. I've got a really good digital system, and it sounds great. It doesn't sound as good for whatever reason. Oh, it's distortion. I don't care.
Yeah.
You know, tube microphones have way more distortion than solid-state microphones. But the Neumann tube microphones that people started getting rid of in the 90s because they were on this quest for no noise, those are back because Frank Sinatra sounds really great. Frank Sinatra recorded with this Neumann tube microphone. He sounded really good on those microphones. Yeah. That's all that matters.
That's right.
Recording is an art and a science. It's not a science. Yeah. It's an art and a science. And the people that ignore the art part of it make crappy recordings. That's all there is to it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So last question. What's coming up in 2026 that you're excited about? New gear, reviews, projects. What's getting you really excited?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I really don't know what we're going to see in the future because I'm not a member of the California Psychics. You hear those California Psychics. We make certainty. Sure. Oh, sure you do. Sure, of course, because we hire the best psychics. I don't know. I know that things seem to be moving towards switch mode power supplies and smaller and more compact, and that's probably a good thing in certain respects. I still find at this point that the big powerful amplifiers that take up a lot of real estate still sound best. I'm always willing to say I could be wrong, and this new stuff is going to be better. I know that in a lot of cases it's great because you can have something that fits into a house. Yeah. You know, I don't know. What's going to come along is more great vinyl reissues. The vaults are opening up, and maybe the reel-to-reel thing will happen. I'm very skeptical.
I hope it gets less expensive. I mean, it's so expensive for reels.
Okay, here's my problem with that. So I've got a restored Revox A700.
Yeah.
It's got NAB equalization. Unfortunately, it's not CCIR. All the tapes that are coming out are CCIR, so equalization is off. So therefore, I must get an outboard preamp, tape preamp that's going to give me both. Okay, that's an expense I have to think about. Yeah. The tapes that are coming out, let's say Rhino's doing these tapes. They're doing flat transfers of tapes. Now, it's not really flat. It's CCR. It's got to have a CCIR equalization built into the tape. That's fine. Yeah. How many recordings that you own on whatever format do you think are flat transfers? Very few.
Right.
Even classical recordings. The mastering engineer... People think, well, it's going on vinyl, so they have to cut the bass. They got to do all these things. That's not really true at this point. You can put almost everything that's on a tape onto a record. But equalization is done because it's got to be touched up for other reasons.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound exactly right. The Electric Recording Company puts out these incredibly expensive records. Some of them are phenomenal, some are not. But they take the tape and they transfer it to a lacquer. They do no equalization whatsoever. And their customers want to hear what that tape sounds like.
Yeah.
Often the tape sounds terrible. So they did Crosby, Stills, and Nash. And that record sounds terrible. It does. Now, when Chad Kassem did it, the mastering engineer played with it. He played with the equalization. I don't know whether he put some compression on it. Whatever he did, that record sounds, it's the best I've ever heard Crosby, Stills, and Nash sound, is that reissue.
Yeah.
If you buy a flat transfer of a tape, unless that tape is really sounding its best as a flat transfer, you're buying something that's not going to sound that good.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, it's not.
Yeah.
But that's what they're selling. I don't know why they sell that. And I think Chad's told them, don't do that. Have a mastering engineer, before you make that transfer, let a good mastering engineer take the master tape and make the one-off copy that you're going to use to make your copies sound as good as it can sound.
Right.
That's the best way to do it. The people who want just the master tape flat transferred as that document, well, they're going to have that document. But I'm telling you, that's not the best way to hear that tape usually. Very few tapes are ready to go.
Yeah.
Out the door. That's why the great mastering engineers are experts, and why they're highly revered, because they will take a tape that's not the best it can sound and make it sound great when they cut that lacquer. But they're not equalizing it necessarily to make it fit on a record, because records can't take everything that's on the tape. They're doing it as an art form to make that tape sound as good as it can sound in your home.
Right. Yeah. Well, Michael, this has been awesome. For everyone watching or listening, you can find Michael at trackingangle.com, on YouTube, and in the pages of the Absolute Sound. We'll drop all the links in the description below. And if you've enjoyed this conversation, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next episode. Michael, thanks again for being here.
I'll just add one last thing at the end. When I was the expert witness of Quincy Jones, at the end of my rehearsals, the guy turned to me and he said, we have a lot of expert witnesses coming here. Usually we have to tell them to amp up their energy a little bit because they're too low energy. In your case, you better take it down about 10 notches or you're going to scare the hell out of those jurors. So I know I've been very high energy and hyper here, so I will scale it back a few notches. But that's who I am, and I tend to get very excited about this subject. So
yeah. We'll see you guys next time on the Fidelity Exchange. Thank you, Michael.